Alright, in this video, I'm going to introduce you to Tempera paint and what to do in your Tempera paint sketches. So in art, we have two different reasons for doing sketches. One reason is for exploring the media. Here are some examples of some sketches where I have started exploring the media of tempera, combining it also with some color pencil on top. Now, you may have experience with tempera, you may not. Whenever I started this, I had very little experience in tempera. So exploring the media and what it can do and what it can't do is important. So I'm going to start off with just taking a piece of paper and drawing some squares for my sketches. So here I have a square and I'm going to just trace it 4 times. So for this unit, I'm going to want you to do 4 exploratory sketches. Here we're not really thinking about our composition for our final one yet, but you might want to think about subject matter. What kind of subject do you want? If you like fish, then maybe you should include a fish in your exploratory sketches. Maybe you really like flowers, so maybe you should try some flowers with your exploratory sketches. So think about, try to start planning for the future with these sketches, but don't worry if it doesn't go well. All right, so I have 4 sections here for my 4 sketches. Now, as far as the requirements go, I've changed the requirements a little bit. This is actually in Schoology. I crossed out the fact that you're going to use some temper cakes. I experimented with temper cakes and it didn't go so well with the color pencil. So we're not going to use those, and all we're going to use is liquid tempera. There are different types of tempera. This is liquid tempera. It comes in bottles. It already has water added. It looks very much like acrylic, but it works a lot different than acrylic. So that's what we're going to use for this unit. So I have a little bit of all the colors that came with the tempera pack in here, but that doesn't mean that's the only colors I can use. I can mix and create. So what you're going to want to start with is, one of the requirements is using some masking fluid and understanding what masking fluid does. So in these little bottles I have some masking fluid, and I'm going to just place some of this weird liquid, don't smell it, it stinks, on my page. So I'm going to just do a few sections with a brush, and then I'm going to very quickly clean my brush. If this stuff is left in a brush, it's going to be definitely ruined in the end. So make sure that you quickly put it in water and clean it off. So I'm going to let that sit, and then I'm going to come back to it and paint it, or paint over it, okay? So what masking fluid does is it masks off an area. You can paint over it and you don't have to worry about it. Here, for example, is one where this is already dry. I masked off these areas, and I'm going to peel them off now so you can kind of see. It keeps the areas true to their original color. So this is on white paper. But say, for instance, I did this on orange paper. The lines underneath would show up as orange. And then when you're done painting, you just peel off the masking fluid like a skin, and it reveals the color underneath, kind of for a cool effect, okay? I have more up here, but I will peel those off later. All right, so I'm going to come back to this. So the first thing I want you to do is really just kind of experiment a little bit, maybe make some backgrounds, maybe try to paint a subject with your tempera paint and see what it's like. I'm going to take a little bit of blue and I'm going to mix it. I don't like to use colors right out of the bottle. I like to be a little bit creative and mix the colors together a little bit. Tempera is water soluble, so that means you can add water to it. You can rinse off your brush with water and it'll come off. So I'm going to just paint a little bit on here and just experiment and see what it feels like going onto the paper. I'm going to add a little bit of water and try to get a gradient. So right away I notice that it's a lot different than acrylic paint, which is something that I'm used to. It just has a different feel to it. So that's really just a gradient. That's very basic, but I can imagine like maybe fish like swimming on this later, and I could add that with my color pencil. So I'm going to let that dry. All right. So another thing that if you're familiar with Sgraffito, you can actually scrape the surface. Now you might not have something to scrape the surface with, but if you have a paintbrush, you do have something to scrape the surface with. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to show you the Sgraffito effect a little bit over here. I think I'm going to mix an orange. It takes a lot of yellow added to the red to make an orange. All right, we'll just do kind of a red-orange. Now you got to do this fairly quickly. You don't want your paint to dry before you do this Sgraffito effect. I'm going to add some yellow, kind of get some color variations, maybe some textures in here. Oh no, it looks pretty much just all yellow for me. Ooh, I got a little bit of that green mixed in. That's okay. All right, so very quickly, I'm going to take the end of my brush and I can scrape in different lines. Now, you could do this with a fork, you can do this with a paper clip, anything that, you know, is kind of sharp in the end. So that's another effect that you can get adding some interesting textures. I'm not exactly sure how I'd use this in a composition, but I feel like it's kind of interesting. Now I'm going to clean off the end of my brush because I don't want to get that everywhere. All right, so another thing that I want to think about is like, how am I going to do something that's like a subject? For instance, I have a clownfish and some green anemones. How can I create a subject like that and do that as a composition? I might want to draw out my Nemo fish first. Yes, I just called it a Nemo fish. Clownfish will always be Nemo fish in my mind. So I'm just sketching out like the basic shape here. I do want to make sure I get in the white areas because I'm going to paint those white, whereas everything else is going to be orange. All right, so I sketched out basic shapes here. Now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to paint the fish. Now this is an orange, but it's not very orange. I'm going to see if I can get it more orange here. All right, I'm going to paint the different sections that are orange in my picture, orange. Now the thing with tempera, here's a disadvantage with tempera. Okay, let's talk about an advantage first before we start tearing down tempera. So one of the advantages of tempera is that it doesn't ruin brushes, it doesn't ruin clothes, it's water soluble, it's never permanent. So if you get it all over yourself by accident, it's going to come right off. So, and that's contrast to acrylic. Acrylic dries as a plastic, and once it's there, it is there. So that's one advantage of using tempera, is that, you know, you can, it's never going to be permanent. Now, unfortunately, that means that it can always be reactivated. So say my painting has been dry forever, for maybe a couple days. If I come back with water or even paint and go on top of it, it's going to reactivate that other paint, and sometimes that can be a problem. It can make for muddy paintings and feel like you're kind of like out of control as far as the paint goes. I am going to add some white on top of this and not just keep it just the paper. Now I got to think about my background. So in acrylic, you would paint your background first and then you would layer your paint on top, but you can't do that with tempera. It would get all muddy and it would just look terrible. So we got to do things a little bit separate. All right, I'm going to do some green in the background. Now, in my picture, I have all these crazy little like things, these like anemone loops. I'm going to do those with color pencil. So my background is really going to just be a plain color background. So I'm going to use a small brush and I'm going to paint this dark green around my Nemo carefully. I'm trying not to hit my Nemo fish. And once I get the fish outlined with my small brush, then I can move to a bigger brush. All right, so I got I have it outlined. So now I can switch to my bigger brush and I can kind of fill that area. I'm okay with having some texture in the background. I am going to be adding some colored pencil on top. It's okay if you go outside the boxes. I am running out of my color though. I need to mix a little bit more. So after this dries, I can come back with some Prismacolor color pencil and I can add that on top. So when Tempera dries, it dries very matte and almost rough. And so it really takes to Prismacolor color pencil very, very well. Now I wouldn't say it works very well, like extremely well with Crayolas, but the higher end color pencils, it works very nicely. All right, so all of this has to dry before I can come back. Now this is starting to get dry, so I could come back with something like I could do is add some color pencil. I could come in with some jellyfish, but I really want it to be completely dry before I do that because I don't want to tear the paper. This paper is very sensitive. Now this stuff is all dry. This masking fluid, it is sticky. It will always be sticky, but it is dry. So now I'm going to take and paint. I can just paint right over the top of that, not even worrying about the masking fluid areas at all. I'm going to mix up a purple, or maybe it's more like a mauve. Try different textures when you're painting, like maybe add some like lights and darks. I'm going to kind of do more of a dabbing with the paint on this one. And I'm just painting right over that masking fluid. I don't have to worry about it. The masking fluid is going to do its job. It's going to mask off that area. So when I remove the masking fluid, underneath will reveal that white paper. I don't have to worry about it. All right, so that kind of has a little bit of interesting kind of marble texture, and I can let that dry. All right, so I'm going to come to some things I've already done that are drier, so I can show you like adding the color pencil, and also what happens if you start like try to add some paint on top. So this one is supposed to be tulips. I thought I had a tulip. Yeah, so I have some tulips here. It's a type of flower. And I do have the option of trying to add some tempera. Let's see what happens if I add some tempera to it. So I have these like little light areas, and then in the greens I have different leaves. Let's see what happens if I try to add it. I'm going to try it with paint, and then I'm going to try it with color pencil, and you can see the difference. Alright, so I'm just getting my brush. So this has been dry for a while. I did this a couple days ago. So I'm really going to look at adding some whites and trying to separate. So one thing that you're going to notice is as soon as you start adding that white, it is going to reactivate the red underneath, and it's going to start blending it together, which is okay, but it has a tendency to get a little bit muddy. Muddy meaning the colors just don't look so pure, and you're going to start to feel like maybe you're a little bit out of control, like you're not, like the paint is controlling you and you aren't controlling the paint. At least that's what I found with tempera. It's just like the colors just don't have that pure richness that like maybe if you were doing like an acrylic that they would have. I'm going to add a little bit of like kind of a darker purple underneath here. So I do have the option of trying to do this, like add shading, add values with the paint itself. But you might find that you're going to struggle. One area that I feel like I really thought worked very well was coming in with some color pencil. So I'm going to do that next. All right, so that looks okay. I don't think it looks fantastic. It's starting to look a little bit more like a tulip. So I'm just carefully layering this. And maybe it helps because it's been dry for a little bit, you know, to get it to not be so muddy. But I wouldn't say like that's my favorite kind of look to tempera. So I'm going to bring in some color pencils and see how my color pencils do. So one thing that we do with color pencils, a lot of times we are set on what we're doing as far as our subject matter, but we forget about our background. So using tempera as your background or as your ground actually helps. It actually makes it a little bit easier whenever you go to use your color pencil. All right, so I'm going to come in with some white, just like I did white paint. Over here, I'm going to try some white color pencil. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see it a little bit better. So on 2 of your sketches, you are going to have to experiment with adding some color pencil. And when I say adding color pencil, that means like adding some shading and being very detailed with your subjects. You should have a subject. You're not just like coloring color pencil and not adding a subject or anything like that. All right, so I'm adding a little bit of the white, which I kind of like, but I do feel like I need to come in with some darker shades on the bottom of the petals. Now, I'm not being very perfect with my color pencil either. I'm trying to keep it very kind of loose and expressive with the different colors and the lines. So you can add color pencil on top to make your subjects look more detailed and realistic. I'm going to bring in a little bit of red. I think my green kind of covered up my red over here. I was a little sloppy with it. Use some red to blend that white out a little bit. All right, so I definitely do feel like I have more control when it comes to adding details like this with my color pencil. With the paint, I just didn't feel like I had the ability to accomplish what I wanted to accomplish. Again, I'm going very fast. Since this is a demonstration, I always tend to go kind of fast during my demonstrations. I'm going to make this part darker because it's kind of enclosed. All right, so there we have kind of 2 different ways of making the tulips become tulips and not just red blobs on the paper. So you can experiment with both, trying to add some detail with the paint and then also adding some detail with the color pencil. And something like this, like I have this prepared, I could easily just add anything. My idea was to add some turtles. So this is just a plain background. I can come in here with some green. And notice how vibrant that green is on top of that purple. I love it. I love when things like very stand out and just kind of glows. I love sea turtles, so that's why I'm drawing a sea turtle really quick. I think that leg got a little bit out of control, but that's okay. So I could do some sort of design on his back. I don't want to have it just plain though. I definitely have to have some value changes on this. So as you're working through your experimental sketches, please think about what would I want to do for my final. Do I want to do a turtle? You're going to have to pick some sort of subject matter. So think about that as you're creating and experimenting with the tempera and also the color pencil together, figuring out, what am I going to want to, show in my composition. So I would just continue on making this look a little bit more like a turtle. He is coming along. All right, so you're going to have 4 sketches, and you're going to experiment with the media. Experiment with masking fluid, like this one. This was a background that I need to add something to, like maybe some fish or something, or jellyfish. That would work well. I just haven't done that yet with the color pencil. Experiment with trying to get some shading on a subject with your tempera, and then try it differently with your color pencil. And then try adding something to a background, a unique background with your color pencil. All right. So those are your first 4 sketches experimenting with tempera. Go ahead and try it.